please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our AP Scholars with distinction.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for September 19th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recognitions. Next, Mr. Dykeman.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. We're going to skip over AP Scholars and recognize our NNPS winner, just because I think there was a little confusion on the start time from one of our schools for our AP Scholars. Give them a chance to show up and get the recognition they so richly deserve. So, Francis Howell Middle School has earned a 2019 Partnership School Award from the National Network of Partnership Schools at Johns Hopkins University. Francis Howell Middle School was recognized for making excellent progress in strengthening and sustaining a comprehensive program of school, family, and community partnerships. This is the 4th NNPS Partnership School Award for Francis Howell Middle, a notable accomplishment and a very good indication of the school's commitment to continually improving its program of family and community engagement. Dr. James, could you bring your NNPS and your FACE team representatives up, please? The Francis Howell Middle School FACE team hosted the Parent Speaker Series, Suicide Prevention, What You Need to Know, which was recognized as a 2019 Promising Partnership Practice. When Francis Howell Middle School students were asked what topics parents and families needed to talk about, suicide prevention was identified as a critical topic for middle school students. The FACE team also hosted an evening activity, #HighSchool, sounds like a potential TV series, for 8th grade students and parents. This activity addressed parents and students' anxieties about the transition to high school and included a panel of students, parents, and teachers. Congratulations to Francis Howell Middle School on another Johns Hopkins NNPS Award.
I don't think I should be in the photo.
You're in. You're in.
One more. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Francis Howell Middle School. Now to our AP Scholars. Francis Howell is proud to announce that 333 students, the most in district history, have been named Advanced Placement AP Scholars for 2018-19. The AP program recognizes high school students who have demonstrated outstanding college-level achievement through AP courses and exams with the prestigious AP Scholar Awards. There are 4 different levels of the AP Awards that students can achieve. And here with us tonight, we have students who earned the AP Scholar with Distinction Award. And again, these students earned that distinction last year as juniors. Many of our AP Scholars have gone on to find prestigious universities. In order to achieve that distinction, these students had an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken, and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more AP tests. That's a lot of advanced placement. So, first, from Francis Howell High School, Pratham Agrawal, Emma Hamilton, Isabella Reed, Mackenzie Richardson, Emily Scott, Lena Steins, Adam Weber, and Riley Weber.
Congratulations. Oh, I thought it.
Yes, if we have any proud parents who would like to take pictures as well, please come on up.
I need you guys in the front row to kind of angle in a little bit. Turn your shoulders in, squeeze together. Yep. One more. Here.
It's like paparazzi, isn't it? That's right. Oh, one more.
Our AP Scholars with Distinction from Francis Howell North are Joanna Dorman, Matthew Julien, Rajat Nepal, and Uma Upamaka.
Can I have you two on the end switch places?
I'm really sure.
I do. It's my fault.
Oh, I don't know if like.
One more.
Walking away. Take your time. Take your time.
Thank you.
And do we have our AP Scholars from Francis Howell Central? Yes. From Francis Howell Central, Kyle Bryan, Faith Carter, Sam Chen, Jane Eilers, and Jeff Morrison. Please come on up. We apologize if Dr. Arnell told you the wrong time. Not pointing any fingers.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Must not have gotten that far.
Can you guys scoot in just a little bit? There you go.
Congratulations to all of our AP Scholars with Distinction. And now to introduce our Student Board Representative, Francis Howell High School Principal, Dr. Dave Whitlock.
Good evening, Mrs. Coe, the board, executive cabinet, and all gathered guests. As Mr. Dyckman just said, I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's student school board representative from Francis Howell High School. And his name is Bofa Kume. He's better known as Bo at our school. And I was a former English teacher, so I'm just going to use a few, not a lot, adjectives to describe Bo so you can get to know him a little bit. Bo is very talented. In the classroom, he's part of several clubs that include DECA, Diversity Awareness, Principal Advisory, and he's one of 3 students from our school selected to be on the district advisory group of high school students. There's only 3 from our building. He's very inquisitive in his learning. Bo is a student in a variety of challenging classes, including the aforementioned advanced placement, art history, French, as well as business and statistics. His current career goal is to attend Howard University in the fall and double major in marketing, business administration, and French. I only know about one of those, that's administration, so we stick to that. Bo's curiosity was piqued when he moved with his family to Cameroon from his 8th through 10th grade year with his mother Yaje as she pursued a medical degree. This experience provided Bo with many perspectives and broadening his understanding of the world and the people in it. Which kind of leads me to the biggest quality that everyone immediately notices about Bo, and that's his leadership. As a freshman and sophomore in Cameroon, he was his class president, and then a couple months into coming to Francis Howell, he became our Diversity Awareness Club president. His classmates and teachers have given him many accolades, including that he is thoughtful, astute, and eloquent as he sensitively responds to the ideas and statements that he hears from teachers and peers that he may have just met. And finally, he's gregarious, which means proactively social, skilled at navigation. Am I correct, AP scholars? Yes. So, in talking with the teachers, Bo is a wonderful student and classmate. Like I said, he just arrived at our school as a junior last year, and I had several teachers in the hall come and say, hey, you got to meet this kid, he's special. And so when I met him, I certainly have the same opinion. But I did ask him this week, like, okay, you're patient, you're open, you're empathetic, like, where does that come from? And he shared with me a special story about his 9th grade history teacher in Cameroon who told him to have a great life, you can't just see with your eyes, listen with your ears, and feel with your hands. You must also see with your heart, listen with your heart, and feel with your heart. Bo certainly has demonstrated great leadership in a short time at Francis Howell High School. I'm proud to share his high school experiences and his leadership experiences on my council, and privileged to introduce him tonight as the Francis Howell High School Student School Board representative.
Just lay down just a little bit. There you go. Thank you.
Welcome, Bo. Thanks for being here tonight, and we'd like for you to participate in our meeting. You can do everything that we do up here except for vote. Feel free to ask any questions. You just push the button, and Mr. Hain will get you squared away on the iPad there. And I also wanted to say that there's a black Toyota Corolla that had left their lights on out front. So if you drive a black Toyota, your plate might be that too. All right, no patron comments. FHEA? FISPA? No. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Board, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is academic high target, best practice. I will turn it over to Dr. Vanderpool.
Thank you. And if I could have our guests come on up tonight. All right, you got the look. So I'd like to thank everyone for allowing us to share something very special happening at Francis Howell High School. With me tonight is Eddie Rogers, a special education program coordinator that supports our transition programs across the district. Kelly Connor, the speech language pathologist at Francis Howell High School. Claire Higgins, the teacher in our transition room. And Liam Cottrell, one of our students, a sophomore working in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and let them take it from here.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight about our transition skills classroom.
I wanted to talk a little bit about what it is. It's a pre-vocational skills program that has grown to 3 classrooms. It's in the lower level of the DLC building. Its sole focus is to target job readiness skills, and we set up the classroom as closely mimicking an actual job site as possible. And we have areas where students can be seated and complete jobs, where they are requested to stand and complete jobs. We have a break room with lockers, just as in an actual work setting. And initially, before we began the program, we went and toured potential job placements for our students and looked at all the different tasks that the employees in these areas were requested to do, and we started making a list. We added to that list of jobs things that our students were required to do on community-based instruction trips. And then we took that list and we designed our classroom by separating the types of jobs into areas. So we have areas that work on food service jobs, assembly work, retail, jobs you would find in offices, medical buildings. And we've grown the program so that we have over 200 jobs currently for the students to work on. So I mentioned we sorted the jobs not only by placement in the classroom, but we also sort them by level of difficulty. So some of our jobs only take 1 to 2 steps to complete, while others can take 10 to 15 steps. Along with that, some of our jobs require a short period of time to complete, while others a much longer block of time. And then we also are able to align the jobs that we have established with goal targets for specific student needs. So each of our students in the classroom have individualized needs in the area of job readiness, and we align our jobs to meet those needs. In doing so, we created a schedule for students for the week where jobs are listed for each day of the week for them to follow. And early on in the program, we realized that we needed some consistency and setting up a routine. So each day our students know they arrive to the classroom, they put their personal belongings, their backpacks in the lockers in the break room, they move immediately over to the schedule, the job board, they check their name, the correct day of the week, they find their first job, they locate it on their own independently, find a workspace, and then they are to communicate the name of the job and then when they're beginning to work. And then those specific targeted work skills, Mrs. Higgins is going to talk more about it.
So the targeted work skills that we focus on in the transition room are things that we got from visiting those jobs out in the community, as well as our CDI trips, are staying on task, which is huge for our students, appropriate behavior, and then improving stamina. As Connor talked about, we have jobs where students are seated, and then we have jobs where students are also standing. We really focus on communication, so working on those problem-solving skills, having our students report when there's something wrong with a job, or there might be a missing piece, or even an extra piece. And then transitioning from one job to another without complaint or without prompting from any of the adults. And then really following a written or a visual directions or instructions. And then in the transition room, we collect, we have data sheets where we are collecting data on each job that each student is performing. They focus on various areas that we're gathering that data as far as communication, social, behavior, accuracy, their time it takes them to the job, the efficiency of the job, and the problem-solving skills with reporting issues. We also use this data when we go in and we update their goals. So in the transition room, last year Ms. Connor and I came up with our Employee of the Week. So we do this each week. We're lucky enough to have our current Employee of the Week with us this evening, Liam. So Liam earns Employee of the Week. During this week, on 8 of his 9 jobs, he had a 90% accuracy or better. Liam incorporated a learned strategy to help him complete those jobs. Liam always has a great attitude, and he's just a wonderful kid. So we are thankful enough to have Liam here tonight to kind of explain that student perspective of the transition room. So you're going to come up here with me? So Liam, what's your favorite job in the transition room?
Walking.
So Walgreens is one of our job sites that we go out on CBI. And what do you like best about the transition room?
I do want different job.
So learning those different jobs, as Ms. Connor talked about, we currently have over 200 jobs in our 2 rooms, and we are actually adding a 3rd room. So we're going to be adding even more jobs to that this year. We also put together a virtual tour for you guys to see the room actually in action. So we're going to go ahead and go to that so you guys can see it when our students are in there and they're actually working. Thank you guys so much for having us come here this evening.
So, do you have any questions about the program?
Any questions? Yeah.
Dr. Vanderpool?
Sure.
Is this only done at Francis Hall High School, or is it done at some of the other high schools as well?
Francis Hall High Schools, we have similar work type experiences at each one of the schools, but Francis Hall is the only one that's been able to find the space for this type of a setup.
Thank you.
I think that's pretty awesome, and that's probably one of the quietest classrooms I've ever seen.
It's very quiet when you walk in. Everyone's focused and working.
Thank you. Up next is the MSBA September Board Report.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of September. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the report issued by the Governor's School Safety Task Force. That task force was established in March and held a series of public outreach sessions around the state during the past few months. It received additional input from surveys, website comments, and a student input session. It also relied on resources available through MSBA's Center for Education Safety. The group issued its final report on July 31st. The task force concluded that schools are overwhelmingly safe places for children to learn and grow, but also identified some areas where safety can be improved for students and school staff. MSBA Executive Director Melissa Randall was a member of the task force, and she says communication is a strong theme in the report.
We are looking at ways that we can improve communication between agencies, whether it's state to local or within our communities, how we can do a better job of communicating information that would ensure our children's safety. And so we have some recommendations in the report about best practices on how to get information distributed and who needs to be, who needs to be receiving that information and how you process it.
Randall says one thing the report does not recommend is arming teachers.
What it does say is that if communities want access to school resource officers or school protection officers, we need to do a better job in giving them access to that. That needs to be a school and community decision, but we do think it's a best practice to have access to a trained, highly skilled school resource officer or a school protection officer. Our preference would be school resource officer, but obviously some communities don't have the resources to provide that. So a highly trained school protection officer would be an alternative to that, but we do not think it is best practice to go beyond school resource officer, school protection officer in terms of armed individuals in our buildings.
The report says there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to making schools as safe as possible, but says the best solutions to address school safety are at the local, community, and individual school level. The full task force report is posted on the MSBA website. Speaking of school safety, there's a new 24-hour, 7-day-a-week school safety tip line available to report potential school safety threats. It's called Courage to Report and is operated by the Missouri Information Analysis Center within the State Highway Patrol. The goal is to help school officials and law enforcement learn about potential school threats as soon as possible so they can determine how to appropriately handle the report. The toll-free number for Courage to Report is 866-748-7047. A number of new state laws became effective at the end of August, as is usually the case after a legislative session adjourns in May, and this year was no exception. That means MSBA's policy department has been busy analyzing those laws to determine if school district policy changes are needed. MSBA Associate Executive Director Kelly Hopkins oversees MSBA's policy department, and she says it's critical that school district policies keep current with state law, government regulations, and court decisions. But at the same time, she says, school boards have flexibility on many policy issues and often can determine what policies best meet the needs of their schools and community.
Districts have local control over their policies, and so it needs to reflect what the district is actually doing or what they believe is correct. For whatever reason, it's their policy. We want to keep them from doing anything that isn't consistent with law, and so we will push back against changes that are made that are not consistent with law. But unless they're not consistent with law, if the district wants language, we put it in there, and then we maintain it so it doesn't go away the next time a policy update is published.
Hopkins says it's important in some cases that school district policies include references to state law.
Occasionally a district will say, your policies are so detailed, and sometimes I would agree with that, but if we didn't include that detail, it might mean that the district's spending a lot of time on the phone with an attorney and trying to understand the law that we were explaining in the policy. Now, if it's our attorney, that's fine, because that's not going to cost them anything. But if it's their district attorney, that could get expensive. So sometimes we do go a little bit over in the explanation of how to implement a particular law.
All MSBA member districts receive regular policy updates as part of membership. Some 240 school districts participate in MSBA's full maintenance policy service that allows MSBA to update and customize policies for school districts. MSBA's policy department is working on some updates and revisions to the service that will be announced in the coming months. The 2019 MSBA Annual Conference will be held at the end of this month at the Lake of the Ozarks. Once again this year, we have some outstanding general session speakers along with some 130 concurrent sessions on a wide range of topics designed to help board members and administrators improve their leadership skills. We hope to see you there. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, And so long from Columbia.
Up next is Personnel Board. I will entertain a motion to approve the extra duty staffing changes as presented.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Simpkins?
Thank you, Mr. Lang. We are excited to bring this change forward to you. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education recognizes Educator Rising as a career technical student organization. And this change fits very nicely with Goal 3's strategic plan as we look to increase the student opportunity in the Pathways to Teaching program. It fits nicely with attracting great candidates to our profession of education, as well as we look at opportunities to grow our own teachers. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Up next is Fiscal Responsibility. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the July and August 2019 financial reports as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Stoffel?
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Just a couple of updates. I did share it in the memo, but I wanted to just mention it here tonight as well. We had a conversation in June about the necessity of making a larger than normal transfer to the Capital Projects Fund related to the purchase of the buses. You'll see that reflected in these statements. The money that we transferred from the from general fund to capital fund has now been reimbursed since we received those payments in July. So our revenue appears to be significantly higher than it would have been typically at this point in the year, but it is an accounting mechanism as we've discussed previously. So I am going to, throughout the course of this year, make adjustment for that additional revenue so that as we have the discussions, it'll be a more year-over-year true comparison. And when we get to November and the revised budget, we'll revise that line item so that the percentages relative one to another shouldn't be off too much. Other than that, we're doing very well for the beginning of the fiscal year. This just covers the first 2 months of our fiscal year. As I noted in the expenditure discussion, our bus drivers are now reflected in the salary expenditure line items. And so our purchase service line item, which was much higher last year, will be significantly lower this year. But some of those costs have been transferred to the salary line items because we're now paying our own drivers rather than paying a management fee to First Student to run our transportation services. And then the last thing is just a reminder that there will still be some contracted services for transportation reflected in our financial statements this year. That's because there will be some trailing payments to First Student just for those things that happened in the latter part of June that will eventually be reflected in our financial statements. But also we continue to have contracted services for some of our special needs transportation. So through Express Medical Transport, EMT, we'll continue to have those expenses. So those will be reflected in the financial statements.
Board, any questions, discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is purchases over $7,500. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2019-20 tax rate.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anything to add, Mr. Supple?
Mr. Lang, I would just say that I shared with the community and the board earlier this evening what the breakout is by fund. And so our overall tax rate is $4.64.8. So that will be the rate that the board is being asked to approve. And then the individual breakdown by fund was shared previously.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the vending revenue budget for fiscal year 20. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the vending revenue budget for fiscal year 2020.
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion in a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Supple, can you tell me when was the last time that vending budget was looked at by a group of people, and when did we start initiating that?
Mrs. Stiglitz, it's probably been 10 years or so that we've had the vending revenue budget presented to the board in this format. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe closer to 4 years ago, we did make an adjustment, reducing the amount for the all-nighter parties from $10,000 per high school to $7,500 per high school. And that's where it is currently.
I guess I'm a little concerned that we only made, $68,000, and over a third of that is going to the all-nighters. And I would just like to know if it's sometime in the future, if we could revisit that. I know I saw that it was also going to some other of the clubs and everything, but how much of the, it just seems like a third of that to go to one organization is a little much.
We'll be happy to communicate to the representatives of those all-nighter groups that there could likely be a change in the 2019-20-21 budget so that they have an opportunity to plan for it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just want to give a little background. I believe you were in the district when we began making providing vending funds for the all-nighters, and that was to offset some profits that our all-nighter groups had via the snack tables, as you might recall.
And I remember that, but I also remember there was, we didn't just take it away from the all-nighter groups, we took it away from a lot of other groups also. And I just want to make sure that when we're reimbursing equally. It just, to me, it's an exorbitant amount of money for just a third of it to just one group. It's just my thoughts. And I think if I remember, Mr. Supple, I wasn't happy about it in that meeting that time. We talked about it anyway, so.
Bo, do you have anything to add to that?
No, let him go.
No, Bo.
Bo would like it.
I'm going to be a senior, so. So if we did just wait one more year. I think this is a good amount. It's a good amount.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye, not me.
Motion carries. Up next is strategic planning. Board, we have a policy review, first reading. Please look over, and if you have any questions or concerns, submit them to administration. We'll be voting on these at the October 10th meeting. And on to our work session. We'll take a 5-minute recess and return at 7:25. All right, yeah, I'm sorry. Bo, so we're going to go into a work session, which is we move down to the other table. So you don't have to stick around for that. So is there anything you'd like to add or say tonight before we leave off the dais?
Well, thank you guys again for allowing me to have this opportunity to be here. Learned and listened a lot about the different processes. I also want to thank you guys again for your diligent work for our school district. I know it's hard, arduous work, but it's important. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you can stick around if you want. You don't have to.
And the worst part of this whole week is that Monday nights I have class from 5 to 9, so it's like literally the whole week. It's ridiculous. Are you yeah, at Maryville. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, this is well, it's actually this is our second to last semester because spring is our last semester, but yeah, we have we're in the superintendency course, so we have to basically work just see everything that she says and does. So I really picked up on that look she was giving Jason about the, because it's just little things, you know, where you're like, geez. I mean, because he didn't stop presenting at all, but it was like, lots of non-different again tonight. I know. I try to. But yeah, I lucked out. My mom came in town from California because my husband had to come late on until so she got in town at 4:30. And I'm like, oh, drop you off. She's gonna be in town. We're taking her to the It's like where, you know how like you go to those tents to buy fireworks? Apparently this is the event that they go to, so it's like this big, it's all in Cedar Lake. So, I mean, there's a different fieldier area, but essentially on that same lot. And so they like do this thing, and then the people who work for the tent buy from, like, you know, that's where they get their inspiration, whatever. Yeah, and so when we went last year, like, ashes were flying on us, which I'm like, this is kind of safe, but it was awesome. You know, you could feel it and everything. Hi. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Well, hopefully. Fingers crossed. We might have. If we, yeah, after we write this paper.
What would be exciting stuff? I know, right? Riveting. I know, right?
Do you feel like we're watching your efforts? Hi. Take notes. She's in our cohort at Maryville. Yes. The class is called the Superintendent, and basically they send me to go to board meetings and just watch every move that she makes. So that's why we're great to see. You're like, it's not that exciting. Don't think I didn't notice that. Look, we're giving Jason Adams. And I'm like, Jason's the only one that doesn't see her giving him this look.
Those are the things that makes
She's attempting to fix technology. Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah, that's what we're learning. I know. I'm shattered during all day.
Next Wednesday?
That'll be interesting, I'm sure. We're just gonna rotate.
Like those text and phone calls at all hours of the night. Put out fires off.
That's what we were just reading.
Lisa Blaha, that was my 20 hours, not hers. She stole it from me.
Is it a mess? Yeah, you need to know where I'm.
I know!
Natural tendency. So as a superintendent, because those are your bosses.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Be like, whoa.
So you have to kind of walk that fine line.
Finesse.
between- Thank you for the feedback.
I think I'm gonna have to
Out
work
of your
on that.
purview. Your purview.
Have to have a few. Wait, just stay in your lane.
Right. Exactly. That's the tough line.
What's going on?
It's where we come down and kind of hear about love and have a conversation.
But
That's the concept.
yeah.
That's the concept.
But then I guess so is it more like you do a work session and then you vote on things the next meeting and then you go to a working session and then you.
I am not surprised. Sorry. I thought you like it from
Next is our work session on possible placing of a tax, a bond on the ballot.
Yeah, so a while ago, we had discussed gathering your group of stakeholders together to talk about our upcoming bond issue. And tonight is our opportunity to have further discussion. We provided the board with a few different documents, and I apologize, some of them were being updated as late as this afternoon. The first one really is after the stakeholder meeting, we sent out an informal survey to those that were in attendance, and the board can see the report that survey provided. Big ideas is we have overall support from those that attended that evening. Most were strongly support or will support the effort. We really wanted to hear a little bit more about what people who came to the meeting thought in regards to what our challenges would be, what would be some specific steps, any ideas people had about communication, and just random other things the board would want to know. And so you can see in the charts there, we had a lot of comments and we tried to categorize them as best we could. into those different topics that you see in each of those charts. We also provided verbatim from each chart, the comments, the post-its, if you recall, from each group. One of the things that I would point out in the survey is that a high percentage of participants in the survey were community members. And so we did have some employees attend, however, the vast majority that responded to the survey identified themselves as community members.
Is this available for the board so they can see it too? Is this available for the screen so that they can see it?
Sure, yes?
I didn't know.
Yes.
I know there's people
Go
in the
ahead.
room. I just wanted to. I'm sorry.
There's actually two different reports. One is kind of a summary and the other is the exact survey.
I'm just sitting by myself. I'm not really busy.
So that's the summary report that I just spoke to. How about this? How about if you go to the other one and go to page.
It should say survey, Vicki.
Yeah.
Trying to find the page.
14, I think it's the next one. That one.
There you go.
Can you skip down to page, question, I'll do it that way. Question 7. So we asked a few different questions prior to that in the survey regarding, how do you think the condition of our buildings are? What would be some projects that you would support? And then we kind of closed with this question about if the bond issue being considered, if it would not require a tax increase, and the bond issue was $250 million, would you support it? And you can see that between somewhat support and strongly support, we are at 86, almost 87% of those that were in attendance. And if you look at the number of people who were not, we had 1 don't know and 3 that somewhat opposed that have responded to the survey. So informal conversations since that meeting with almost anyone that I have talked to, the biggest concern really was the amount. So we, by we, I mean Matt and Will, went back and revisited some of the projects to see how we might change the number, make some adjustments in order to address that input that we had received. And so Mr. Supple will speak a little bit to the phase 2 projects that were not outlined in the meeting that we now have more closely outlined.
Of course, the introduction always has to go back to the fact that we are basing all of this work on groundwork laid by our architects as they completed the comprehensive facilities master plan. So they outlined all of the work that needs to be accomplished over the next 10 to 15 years and didn't particularly prioritize it. And that was a job that the facilities committee under Matt and Will's leadership helped to do. The next, and at the last work session, we were able to bring with you the sum total of that work for what we consider to be the most urgent that needs to happen in the next 1 to 3 years, somewhere in that time framework, of about $170 million. So the question is rightly posed at our last meeting, how can you put some numbers behind what would happen in phase 2? And so that's what we've done to try to show you where we are. Again, we begin with the elementary schools, and you can see, as we shared in very broad brushstrokes at the community meeting, a lot of this work is related to life cycle replacement issues. Roofing, HVAC, window renovations, flooring, those are all the typical things that will need to be updated in our schools as we move forward. In addition to that, there are some very specific new construction items at both Independence and John Weldon. There are some additional classrooms that are being proposed. We believe that our enrollment trend would show us that by the time we're able to complete that work, we will have need for the additional space at those two buildings. As we take a look at the middle schools, if I can get my screen to, again, a lot of life cycle replacement work, roof replacement, interior renovations, HVAC. These are things that are going to need to be updated as we move forward. At the high school level, not too much different, although slightly different. We are doing some expansions of athletic facilities in order to bring greater parity among our three high schools. And we anticipate that there'll be a need to do some expansion of the parking lot at Francis Howell High School. Francis Howell Central would get a renovated auditorium. If we were successful, all things moving forward, the Francis Howell North would, of course, have a new auditorium as part of the new building. Francis Howell High School would get a new auditorium as part of that Phase 1 work. And for Phase 2, we would renovate Francis Howell Central's auditorium in order to bring it up to par with what would then be the state-of-the-art in Francis Howell for our auditoriums. We also addressed our early childhood sites. Again, most of that work being listed there is related to life cycle replacement, and we have identified the same type of work that needs to happen at some of the other buildings that are somewhat ancillary to our educational programs, but still important. So the Burbas, the facilities building, this building, all of these need to be updated and maintained, and so that work has been folded into that which would happen in what we're calling Phase 2. And then on a district-wide basis, we know that we will continue to need to invest in security upgrades. We were somewhat vague in putting that line item on here without more specificity, just because we know that the science behind what makes schools safe is constantly evolving. And so we need to be flexible enough to be adaptable as those changes come forward. But we do want to make a commitment to continuing to provide a safe environment for our students to learn and our faculty and staff to work. We do have some portables in the district. Our hope would be that by the time we are able to move forward with all of these projects, that we would be able to get rid of those, and there is some cost associated with just removing them from our properties. So we've arrived at a total of almost $67 million for the second phase, and all told, we're now somewhere in the neighborhood of about $240 million. We tried for Phase 2 to factor in some estimate for inflationary growth over the cost of construction relative to the construction costs we used for Phase 1. We understand that we may or may not be good prognosticators of what's going to happen with the economy, but it would give us an opportunity. We did want you to know that we tried to factor in the fact that costs of goods and materials and labor will likely be more expensive as we move forward, and so we tried to factor some of that in.
Can I add a couple of points, Kevin?
Absolutely.
The fun microphone. So as Matt and I created this document, it should be known that we had items that we knew about, like the need for storage space, the additions to John Weldon and Independence, but we also cross-referenced everything on that facilities master plan document that was created last year. So some of these projects are in the 10 to 15 year range, so they're everything that we would need over the next 15 years from that master plan document and from information that we have in facilities and with projections on capacity. So this should be all-encompassing. I would caution, since we're talking about a roof project 12 years out, We may have added 10 or 15%, but we really, that's going to be tough to say what a roof's going to be at that point. So we know there's going to need to be some measure of error for that cost in the future.
So that's what we have to present to you tonight. The other thing that I would add is I still sense some reluctance, although we do have a good amount of support at this point. And one of the things that might help bring clarity moving forward would be a survey. I know that we need what we need, and why survey might be a question that someone asked, but a survey can help bring clarity to a few things. So you see some questions within the stakeholder group that we had together about should we go out for smaller more frequently or go out for the big one and know that we are taken care of for the next 15 to 20 years. That would be a question that you could ask on a survey, as well as hot topics. So one of the things we learned from this pilot of a survey is just what the community will support the most, and that is safety and security measures and life cycle replacement things. And so you can get an idea from a survey in regards to what information the community needs to make a good decision when they enter the voting booth. So that would be another thought. 2 ways to go with the survey. We certainly could do an informal one in-house. What you get from using an outside company to gather survey data is, it comes from a neutral party. So it would be coming from the Francis Howell School District. The other thing that they have is it's statistically analyzed, but also they have comparison data. So they can tell you that, when we looked at the Springfield survey, they were at this percent, and then they passed or did not pass. And they can compare our results to other results and their bond issue results. And so that's something else to consider. I believe when Mr. Dykeman researched this, we're talking $15,000 to $16,000. Unlike last time, I don't know that we would enlist a group to support us in the campaign just to complete the survey. Anything you would add?
Yeah, that's approximately the 16 to 20,000 probably for the survey.
There is one more option. I'm not sure it meets our target if we're trying to get some more information in order to gain clarity, but other districts are using something called Thought Exchange, and some of you might have seen that from different vendors at different conferences. It works similar to a survey, but it really is a conversation with the community. So the community could comment, I believe we need a new north with the 7 different phases that were originally built there. And people could support that comment, and you would have an idea of who is supporting that comment, and how much traction a comment gets in Thought Exchange. The advantage of Thought Exchange would be that we could use it for things in addition to a bond issue. So, I don't want to bring up the word calendar, but you might be able to use it for something like a calendar, or if we ever change school start times, or a lot of different things that you would want to have conversations with your community about, you could use Thought Exchange for. So there are several districts, Orchard Farm, Parkway, that are already using that as an option. So at this time, I just think it would be great for the board to have some conversation.
What's the cost of the Thought Exchange?
Thought Exchange is a little more expensive, but again, you're getting more out of it than a one-time deal. So I think we're at $26,000.
Approximately $24,000 a year right now for an annual subscription. Of course, if the board's interested, I would certainly enjoy.
You would haggle that down so
I would
much.
enjoy getting a price point lower. But the idea with Thought Exchange is it's an annual subscription, so as Dr. Hendricks Harris said, once we had concluded the bond issue question, then we could go on to something else to sort of test the waters with our community and see what the temperature was.
You beat me.
Would the students be open, would they be questioned in this Thought Exchange?
Yeah, it's available and open to anybody online that can access it. It's usually centers around a primary question. Obviously, in the example we're giving here, it would be about our facilities. And then not only do community members comment, but community members then rate other community members' comments. So you get the idea sort of which way the scale is going.
Is it strictly like district families and stuff, or how would they go about getting the email list? Or is it strictly email only?
It's not email, it's an online portal. So the challenge, as with everything we do when we try to reach our larger community, would be to engage those in the community that don't have students in the district and get them to provide their input. But that, again, that's always our challenge.
Can it be personalized?
You
Francis,
can put your face on it if you want.
okay. Francis Howell North, I would
Can only imagine the
think,
comments.
not the parents are selfish, but that principal to hear from his families, can you like,
I'm not sure if we can desegregate data by geographic area, but it's one of the things we do in our Survey Monkey survey. It's what area of the district are you from? And I imagine we would be able to ask a question like
but
that.
I was thinking if it came from the high school principal, it came from Henderson Elementary School principal, that the parents might react more. You know, if they could get it to, I mean, that's,
You can put your name or you can remain anonymous.
okay. 'Cause
There
it's-
are ways to disaggregate the data, I just don't know how deep and detailed it would go. So you could, you know, in speaking with Orchard Farm, they could look at what is employee comments and, not like support, what do we call it, ratings. You could pull out the employee ratings and the employee comments from your parent, from your community. So there's some level of disaggregation. I'm not sure that it would be able to get to geographic locations.
'cause those are people that are highly interested. You know,
You do
their
have
kids
to-
are in the building and,
You have to give some information in order to participate so that we could disaggregate that.
okay,
I don't know if that would be customizable, something we could.
And can you interact, go back and forth if there's questions? You can answer the questions, interact with the community and.
Yes.
I think one of the main concerns might be a lot of the seniors who don't get that involved with technology, and just curious to how we can.
Yeah, it would limit those who do not have online access.
And they're usually the voters.
Yeah, I want to tag on to what Chad was saying. How does the survey benefit us compared to this other software product for the lesser attached families in our district and our seniors?
So in terms of the survey, I assume you're asking the third-party survey.
Correct.
So the third-party survey is a random sampling of our registered voters in the district. So it would give us a better idea of what our voters thought, and would be more statistically valid in terms of percentage that support and percentage that don't, that would then be reflected on election day. But it's less of a conversation.
And do we know with the third-party vendor how that survey might be administered?
It's primarily via phone, but they have some pretty interesting technology. Some people think that it's just landlines now, so they only get, you know, the 70-year-olds. But they have some pretty neat technology when it comes to generating cell phone numbers and the number of calls they have to make per actual answers they get. But it's primarily via phone.
I think one of the things that you would need to know is that the surveys that we would get from a third party would be a random sampling. And so scientifically, if you survey 400 or 4,000 or 40,000, there's a magic number, and ours is about 400, that the results do not change with each additional survey. And so I know that's a difficult concept for many to grasp, because it seems like we are just interviewing or surveying 400 people that can't be representative, but scientifically there is a magic number that would make the results would not change with additional survey participants.
So I guess my concern with the survey is they're going to be asked some very pointed questions, and they probably don't have the background or the information to give us an educated answer. They're just going to wing it. Oh no, I don't think you need a new auditorium here, or you don't need that. I saw in the survey or the comments where somebody said, well, why would the Howell North need a new building? It's 30 years old. Well, they don't know that it's been added on to 7 different times, and 30 years ago was the last time it was added on to. And it rains inside when it rains outside. And my concern is we're going to get this survey back, and we know we have to do these things, and we need this money regardless of what the survey says. So my concern is that, you know, we're going to get the survey, it's going to say what it says, and we're still going to do what we need to do.
I agree with that, and I would say there's a couple variables here. So how you run your campaign, what information you target voters, what they need, could be something that you could gain from a survey. And the other thing is, I do think if the survey came back that we're nowhere near ready, so we have a lot more than an educational campaign could sway,
that we could consider it not being April and delaying it until we can get some more votes. You don't want to, you need a baseline to understand where you are in regards to support, especially with this number.
And while the majority of people who take the survey don't have a lot of context about where we are in the state of district facilities, that's also true for our voters.
Yeah, it's hard to have them see behind or above the ceilings. You know, they just see that it looks decent or okay, but it's behind the scenes of people who aren't in construction or.
I would almost rather, oh, iPad's not working, Renee's gone. I would almost rather do the thought exchange, because we can then have those communications and that conversation with the community that we've been being asked for a long time. And so I think that would be money very well spent. And the other money, I'd almost rather than paying that kind of money for a survey, I'd almost rather hire a consultant to actually run the campaign. I don't know if we can do that.
The informational campaign.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean, just kind of where I'm at with that is.
Yeah, I think the thought exchange is good because we can use it for other things, because like you said, it's a subscription, but we still need to find a way to target the non-technology people.
Door to door. I think for this to happen, our community is going to have to see the 7 of us working our tails off to communicate the need and the necessity.
Gotcha, I got it written down.
You wrote that down, huh? Great minds think alike.
Kevin, I don't see Union High School. Is that not part of?
That's phase 1.
That's phase 1.
Look at you knowing your phases.
Hey,
girl.
Don't ask me about phase 3. I don't know that one yet.
You are.
I remembered that.
You remembered that. All right, I'll be quiet.
She's on, she can see it.
Anyone else?
I guess I'll add one thing. As far as the exchange of ideas survey tool, I don't know what you wanted to call it, but whatever you called it, but.
Subscription.
Subscription, okay. Like you said, we can use it for a lot of other things, but can you give us an example or two what else we could use it for? Because I don't really know how, you know what I'm saying, how beneficial and what could we use it for that would justify that type of expenditure?
The calendar would have been one. Questions about curriculum, anything, priority items in the bond issue.
Yeah, I think Parkway pretty much has, and we do this with other things, a project up for Thought Exchange at all times. So they will put something up on Thought Exchange, take a break, put something up, take a break, in regards to community feedback. And so, it could be, it could be, as we said, things like calendar, bond issues, facilities. I'm trying to think of the other things that Parkway and Springfield have used it for. Orchard Farm just used it in regards to talking about their student schedules. So they were talking about times of day, not necessarily a calendar, and they put that out there for that. So I think any of the big decisions that are made, we could put out there for conversation.
And it's yearly?
It is yearly. And we wouldn't have to commit for a long period of time. We could commit for a year of trial and see how much we use it and what we use it for.
Yeah, because I was just going, 16 to 20,000 for just a regular standard survey, and that's all you get. I'm thinking if we can use it for something else and use it as the survey.
I just think we have to keep in mind that I believe they're two totally different markets. The thought software is going to hit a target audience, but not our entire target audience. I'm very nervous about our elderly voters, our families that are not connected directly to the school district, and reaching out to them.
And much as a Survey Monkey survey that we would administer, so the one that we gave to our attendees, if we were to give that to our larger community, we know that about 95% typically of the people that respond to those surveys are our parents and our staff members. So it's certainly great to get the feedback because we know if we're going to pass something of this size, we're going to need our staff and our parents on board. But it does not give us a true indication of what our larger community, we have approximately 125,000 people that live in the district, and as of Wednesday, 88,835 registered voters. And it's a minority of that number that works in the district or that are parents in the district.
I also believe with a third-party survey, if we work with them, they have experience with other school districts and opportunities like this, and we can work with them to develop questions that are also educational and informative in nature. So I agree that, you know, the 2/3 of the families or individuals in the district who are not connected directly with the schools may have less information, may not be as knowledgeable, may not understand the needs up north and behind the walls and ceilings like we've talked about. But couldn't we use the survey to provide a sentence or two of information and then ask a question?
Yes, every good survey does a little bit of education along the way.
And say if the board is interested in a third-party survey, not the thought exchange, that I believe last time we RFQ'd it?
Yes.
We RFQ'd it. So you could RFQ and you could interview a few companies that could provide that service for us. The other thing is thought exchange, because it's not bond specific, I do think, you know, I'm looking at other examples of how districts have used it because it's not specific to the bond issue. And one of our goals in strategic planning is two-way communication. We could use some of the funds that we have set aside for strategic planning in order to increase that two-way communication and try thought exchange for a year.
Regardless of the bond issue, I think thought exchange sounds like a fantastic idea.
Yeah. Those of us that run Goal 4, the strategic plan, think it's a great idea too.
And I'm gonna do some research on it, obviously, I don't even really know.
We could get a
anything
demo
about it.
of
They
that
have all
up
kinds of cool
We can get a
stuff.
demo of that up as well. We could even have some other districts that have used it.
And I think Rockwood actually used it for their strategic planning.
Yeah, that would have been one time, that would have been handy.
For as much as it counts, I also think it's a great idea.
Okay, good. Bo says go.
Bo knows.
You know, you can't hear that enough, can you?
I do
Joe
feel
doesn't
more
know.
individuals are able to speak more in something like a thought exchange. You can state more opinions, you can go back and forth, you can answer more questions. I do worry about the larger community, but I'm not sure if we, on a survey, how much information on a phone survey can you get out to an individual and have it stick?
I do think that while you can educate somewhat, the goal of the survey is not the communication in the campaign. It is to collect data in order to run an informational campaign.
You want to capture what the average community member and what the average voter knows about the issue in the district before they go to the ballot.
Right.
The other thing is, I don't think we'd ever run out of questions for thought exchange. I think with 45 different action teams currently working
That was
under
a dig, by the way.
5 different goal areas, I think that there are lots of questions that these action teams might want to ask of our school community and our staff as part of that work.
As a follow-up to that, can you have multiple strands going at the same time?
I'm sure they'd want to sell us multiple subscriptions for that kind of an application, but we can always ask. We can always...
I do think in some districts they are doing like a big thought exchange, like this is the and then you can target to certain smaller groups.
So, quick question.
Go ahead,
So
Bob.
in terms of phase one, from what I've heard so far, so in terms of phase one, like how fast is that going to be completed? Like the sort of like the.
Or started?
Yeah,
Start
work.
work.
If we were, we had some conversation about a potential April 2020 date for the election. If we were successful with that election, we could begin some of the work in the summer of 2020. So the range of work that's being considered in phase one is pretty extensive. And so some of the projects are easier to do and would be completed in a relatively short period of time. But if you think about Francis Howell North, the biggest project in that phase, that's probably a 4 or 5 year project, to get all the way through.
So what I'm hearing from what I'm clear about is that the thought exchange would be something the board would be interested in pursuing as part of the strategic plan and our goal to increase two-way communication with our community. What I'm unclear about is, would we also like to talk to a third-party vendor in regards to a scientific study in order to run a strategic informational campaign? We can do something internal as well. It's not going to be as reliable as something that we would get from a third party, but it's possible, similar to the survey that we sent out after the last stakeholder meeting.
Do we ever use robocalls in our informational campaigns to people other than our parents?
Yes, we use them for our frequent voters well.
We use them as a reminder to our parents that tomorrow is election day.
Yeah.
Again, as a district resource, we can only use that for informational purposes. And the Telephone and Consumer Protection Act would limit to a great degree what you use it for.
Some campaign committees have used robocalls of frequent voters. Not informational campaigns.
We could use it to tell them that thought exchange is available.
We could use them to inform them that we have a new two-way communication platform.
I mean, we could, and, did you know that Francis Howell is going out for a bond issue, blah, 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 and we want to hear from you, join us on Thought Exchange or whatever that is, and send that out to the entire 88,000 or whatever, I mean, I don't know how much that costs, but it can't be much more than a survey to do a one-way robocall, right? Just a thought.
So clear about the direction regarding the thought exchange.
I thought we were done with that.
Unclear if we are, in addition, are seeking a third-party survey.
Correct.
That is unclear to me.
I
don't answer my phone. I don't think it's worth it. If it doesn't say Matt on the phone, I don't answer it. When he leaves a message and I call him back, I mean, I'm afraid you're just going to waste your money. Because I haven't paid off my student loans, and that was 40 plus years ago. That's one big long loan.
How would you know that if you didn't answer the phone?
They left a message.
I do think that's a valid concern. I'd be more interested if we did go down a third-party route. Matt, you talked about some of the technology that they use, that is a concern. How valid is that still today with those techniques?
Do you want to talk to a third-party vendor so that they can answer some of these questions? So I see 4-ish
I think Renee does, but she can't see us shaking our heads.
I think 4-ish members nodding their head no.
Okay.
And I don't see
I don't answer my phone. I'm a texter. So it's hard for me to envision how this would be successful. But I'd be curious, not to necessarily talk to someone, if there was data on, shoot over some information. But as of right now, I'm not seeing how this would be beneficial. Especially with getting out the information we want to get out to them.
No, it's not a tool primarily for getting out information. It's a tool for gathering information.
To gather the information, but to make a proper assessment on whether or not what you're going to support, you need to have the facts behind it. Some of the facts. So I don't know how.
It was like talking with some of the other superintendents, depending on what company you would go with. Some of them are pretty predictable of how the vote ends. So
yeah, they have data that
400 randomized, and it does correlate to how the bond issues go.
They can predict within a couple of percentage points most election outcomes.
So then what would we do? So we get the survey and they tell us that you're, 55% you're not going to pass this. 60%, 70%. I mean, what are we going to do? We have to do these projects. So
well, it's not that you don't have to do it. It's that then perhaps you think about maybe you think about November of 2020 instead of April, and a longer-term campaign to inform your community.
A different education campaign maybe?
I mean, it's September, we're talking 6 months from now.
Yeah, we need to
That's,
move.
if we can get on it, we have a lot of time to educate and inform.
I think if it came back 70% of your community was not supportive, we would have more work to do and we would be spending a lot of time and energy, especially if all 7 of you are gonna rally around this and work your butts off, you would be spending a lot of energy for a likely not good outcome. And so again, you could delay it, you could change your strategy, you could look at smaller amounts multiple times. You could make some adjustments.
And we had a pretty diverse group in the meetings. So
We did, and
it's a little bit different
It is different.
than before.
I mean, you do have some things working for you that we haven't in the past, so I think we have a wide range of supporters that based on the stakeholder meeting. It's a no tax increase bond issue, which is different from the other campaigns that we have recently run. There are tangible things that people can see that will come as a result. That makes a big difference to voters. And I do think there's a common understanding that our buildings are aging, and of course, we're gonna need money to keep them up.
And as I mentioned, we can always share out, the exact same or a version that's pretty close to the survey that you guys all saw after our meeting last week. And it provides us a lot of good information. For example, most of the respondents say that what's their primary source of information about the district?
Employees.
District employees. So what's that a reminder for us to do? Make sure that our employees understand the bond issue forwards and backwards.
How many surveys do we send out?
How many surveys do we,
Particular
this only has about 32 respondents, I believe.
Right, how many do we?
Somebody said it was over 40 at the end of the day today, but I do.
But
think
75 is a pretty good
it's-
response rate on the survey.
It is.
How many people did that get sent to?
Like 40-ish,
Oh, wow. Well,
and had 32
that's
respondents.
fantastic. We won't get that on every survey.
No.
So this might not be a popular idea, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw it out. What if we had a small tax levy on the ballot too? And then maybe they will, okay, this is not a tax increase. I mean, like I said, it might be a silly idea, but if you got them both on there and this is a non-tax increase and this is a tax increase, does that help us pass the bond issue? I don't know.
I think it's just, we go for the buy.
You have a higher threshold of approval for a bond issue than for an operating levy. I would say that the general consensus among entities who have either tried it or been around what was trying to say that you'll vote for one and not the other. And then that kind of dilutes your vote. You may have had enough support for one of the issues to pass, but you split your you split your supporters. It would be a risky strategy, I think, and I think confusing for voters.
Okay. Here's a different way to look at it. We're not going to just say, here's what we're going to do. We are going to go out and have community meetings or in different segments of the district to gather input from our community. And if we start doing that, and once we start getting that feedback, if it appears as though we're, driving headfirst into a wall, then maybe we think about and do a survey. But at this point in time, I think if we go out and we start doing the things moving forward, and we'll see if there's uniform support or not support, and the word will spread and people will start giving us feedback. And I don't know the best way to do it. We can give out business cards with a website that you can sign in or give questions or something about it, and just give those out all over the community. If you give out at your church or organizations you're at and say, hey, Francis Howell's considering it, if you want some information, go here. There's a bunch of different ways, but I think we could do that prior to spending money on a survey that I don't know is going to be super effective for us at this point in time. If we decide that we are going down the road and the input that we're seeing, we're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe then we go out and ask for a survey. Whether we do the survey now, or whether we do the survey in 3 months, we can't actually place anything on the ballot until January.
You all would need to vote in January.
Right, so it's not impaired, there's nothing imperative at this point in time, so I wouldn't be in favor of having a survey done at this point in time until we go out and try to garner some more of our support, our feelings from the community first. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody.
Makes sense to me.
Just an idea. I just think the only fear I have with that is essentially the supporters coming to those sort of meetings are already people that know, and I think that the number one fear here that we're trying to address is like people that don't know or aren't aware. That's my only fear about.
So the people that would come to the informational meetings would be representative of our voters.
Exactly.
That's always the case.
That is the fear.
But we give them the opportunity.
I mean, we could.
So direction from the board regarding third-party surveys, it seems as if, just looking around the room, most of our board members are not in favor of a third-party survey.
Correct.
At this point in time.
At this time.
Is that the will of the group?
I think so.
Is that the only question that we had, was survey or no survey, or are we talking amounts and things as well tonight?
I do think we need to take that next step either tonight or at another work session in regards to, are we firm on April? It seems as if we are in our informal conversations. And then are we firm on the amount? So the amount we bring at this point with making some adjustments based on the feedback from last week is 247?
Well, it's 237, so 237, $240 million. We would probably take, if the phase 2 projects, if the board feels like that captures work that we would validate that you need to do, we may get some additional input from our architects to see if estimates we've made would be correct or might need to be adjusted so that we would size the issue correctly from the start. We're definitely going to be below 300.
Correct.
The question is, how much above 237 might it need to be in order to ensure that we can go complete all the projects that we've outlined?
Are you talking phase 1, 2, and 3, or just 1 and 2?
1 and 2.
We've divided it to 2. The work will be
It's 2
spread
now.
out over many years.
So the 2 phases will take us out 15 to 20 years?
Yes.
So 2020
Probably
taking
15.
care of us for another 20.
Yes.
And I always want to say barring the unforeseen. So, sewers go in on the other side of 40, we're going to see some growth. There's potential that we could be needing buildings. Construction costs go up significantly we know they're going to go up. We figured some of that in. They go up significantly more than what we're anticipating. It could be sooner and it could be lower or it could be more difficult. But it's been so great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed your input.
Mary, I'm sorry, do we need to
Matter of fact,
make
could you
a...
come back next month?
do we need to make a motion?
No, we can't make motions in work session.
Not work session, okay.
No. We just give them ideas.
I think we move forward.
We certainly can bring language back next month if that's the will of the board.
Yes.
Or what Mr. Haynes is suggesting, go out and do some informational meetings and then vote to put on the ballot in January, which would be your typical timeline.
I guess some of the things that we've talked about in the past is it'd be ideal to get on a 5-year cycle, do our bonds, issue our bonds along with our strategic plan. Your bonds or your tax levy, have those fund your strategic plan, whether it be for 5 years or 10 years. And we're on a different cycle right now. And as much as I'd like to get into that cycle and start that moving forward, we are in such a state that we need a large surplus of funds up front. So, if the way that by lowering the amount somewhat, I think that puts us in a 15-year range, and maybe in year 14 or 15, we can start looking at a smaller bond issue that would get us on that 5-year cycle. So that, because we know that a 5-year cycle would be in the best interest of the district as a whole, and it would fund it per strategic plan, and it just makes, more overall sense than trying to do this every 20 years. And that way your community gets more used to it, they understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, people are more informed. You don't have to educate people every 20 years. 15 years ago, how many, the transition in our district is, huge. So you're going to have people that, well, when was the last time they did it? If you have a 5-year cycle, it'll be much more informative and stuff. So, the lower amount, I can deal with that as long as it's going to take care of those phase 1 and 2, because those are definite needs. And as you said in the previous meetings and being on the facilities committee, a lot of these needs are things that have the potential to shut down a school building, not for hours, but for days or possibly weeks, in order for us to get replacement parts or issues that we can get going. So this is a need, it's something we need to do. And if we lowered it amount, and I think that gives us a potential to get on a better schedule, down the road, maybe a little bit earlier.
So is the board asking that we do informational meetings between now and the end of the year, and then bring the ballot language back in January? Or do you want ballot language for at the next board meeting, and we're going?
So if we get ballot language now, we have until January to change that, correct?
Yes.
So what I think would be beneficial is if we have that when we do the informational and we're holding meetings, because otherwise it's all hypothetical. And so we don't have I guess if we had a number, but
So mock up some draft language, but you're not ready to take a vote next time?
No. I would recommend taking a vote when the time is right to take the vote, because we can't place it on the ballot now anyway.
Right.
But I do think that there is merit to having, here's what we're wanting to do, and have it out in front of the people so that people can start talking about it, and therefore we'll get feedback from people if we have something out there. And then we can adjust that up, down, or sideways, depending upon how the feedback comes back from thought exchange.
Seeing a lot of head nodding, is that what right? Is that a little bit?
Yes, just a
That's
mock-up
fine.
draft, and works for me.
And I do have a.
Oh,
Michelle just.
just throw me around, Michelle.
I was just making sure you were still there and you could hear us
I
and.
did place a call
All
to
good. I was just about to
the
comment.
attorney
I'm
who
in
assists us with
agreement. I
our
think
bond issue
some
work,
draft language would be
to
good.
talk to her about language.
Okay, Renee's got something to say now.
I'm in agreement. I think some draft language would be good to have, maybe a couple different options. Continue to seek feedback from our community. I'm in agreement that I'm not ready for a vote. Let's continue to seek that feedback and ponder and change and adjust as needed based on that feedback.
I would prefer just one message, not several, because then that's going to be confusing.
Correct.
I apologize. Several or a couple draft ballot language is what I was referring to.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
The question I have is on phase 1 and phase 2, we're making additions to 3 of our elementary schools, if I read that correctly. But we're not proposing any additions to any of our middle schools. Do we have that excess capacity that will absorb that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have space
Just
in
wanted
the
to
middle
make sure.
schools. The secondary sites are, they're able to support more kids right now in their elementary schools.
Okay.
So Hollenbeck would probably be the building that is the tightest for space, and we did a walkthrough there, and they still have some rooms that they could use. And that's after a recent boundary change. But all those students are now in that site, so we wouldn't expect big growth unless something happens south of 40 and there's some big developments that go in. We don't foresee a need at the middle schools.
All right, so thought exchange, not a third-party survey, and begin to bring some draft ballot language for conversation only, and begin to plan some informational meetings.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Successful work session, we got clarity and direction.
Wow.
It was only 8:18.
What?
Kumbaya.
Superintendent comments.
Yes, just a few things. Rachel Wilcox is a first grade teacher at Independence. I'm sure you've heard she's been named one of the 7 Teacher of the Year finalists by the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Rachel had her final interview in Jeff City last week, and the Teacher of the Year announcement will be made soon. Of course, the current Missouri Teacher of the Year is our own Shelley Parks from Francis Hall North, so we have an opportunity to go back to back with this prestigious award. We're proud to announce that 5 Francis Hall students have been named semifinalists in the 2019 National Merit Scholarship Program. These seniors are among 16,000 semifinalists chosen as part of the annual academic competition. The semifinalists, who were selected based on PSAT qualifying scores, will compete for some 7,600 national merit scholarships worth more than $31 million to be awarded in the spring. The Francis Hall semifinalists are Andrea Lynn and Isabella Reed from Francis Hall High School, Brent Harfman and Logan Notstraub from Francis Hall Central, and Joanna Dorman from Francis Hall North. Many of those students were here this evening for the AP Scholars. The 5th annual Francis Hall High School First Responders Night football game was on Friday, September 6th. This great event was organized by Activity Director Sean Irwin with the help of the Vikings 12th Man football boosters and included a flyover from a vintage World War II bomber. Then last week on Patriot Day, we had events around the district to recognize our first responders, including our school resource officers who helped to keep our students and staff safe. Cotsey Elementary students and staff had a surprise visitor last month. The National Hockey League Stanley Cup trophy made a surprise stop at the school as part of its victory tour celebrating the St. Louis Blues 2019 championship to the delight of over 800 Cosley students and staff members. In collaboration with the Missouri Association for College Admissions Counseling, Francis Howell held its first district-wide college fair on Thursday. High school juniors from across the district were transported to Francis Hall Central and given an opportunity to speak with representatives from over 100 universities, community colleges, and trade schools from across the country. The calendar committee has completed its second meeting. Difficult choices are being made. I want to thank all those that are participating in the committee and also Lisa Simpkins for leading this endeavor. Congratulations to Francis Hall Central. They were voted the best public school in St. Charles County by the readers of the Community News. And last but not least, we have an upcoming event with Nilo Tech E-Cycling. Francis Hall will be hosting a free community-wide appliance and electronics recycling event on Saturday, October 5th from 9 to 1 at Burris.
Okay, up next is the Board of Education comments and requests. Board, any comments or requests? None? Upcoming meetings, October 10th, 2019. Any changes?
Mr. Lang, I just wanted to share with the board that we've added an item to the agenda. There's been some conversation with the board about an audit of financial procedures within the district. I've been in conversation with our auditing firm and we're refining a scope of work. And I anticipate that at the October meeting, I'll bring a recommendation to the board for a specific scope of work to begin an audit of our internal control processes and other financial procedures. We envision this would probably be a beginning of a multi-year plan in order to do that. So that'll be something that we'll share with the board at our next meeting.
Okay. Next up is the November 21st, 2019 meeting. Anything on that?
Mr. Lang, we have an opportunity to refund a portion of our outstanding general obligation bonds of series 2010, 2011, and 2012. I was in consultation with our underwriter. We anticipate we'll bring pricing to the board at the November 21st meeting. Interest rates are currently working in our favor, and so we hope that that situation will continue and we'll be able to save a good amount of money.
Information, there's information enrollment stuff here for you, discipline reports for the board. Board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned.
Score update, Cardinals are leading the Cubs 4-1 in the 6th.